Hi, I'm Charlie, and this is my first anticipated reads video for January 2021. I'm not going to read all of these because that would be crazy, and I don't have the time for that, and I have my own books that I want to read. But yes, I think I want to just share these with you guys and see if you're interested. These are just the ones that interested me when I looked through the catalogues. And yeah, I looked through a lot of catalogues, so please watch these videos because it was a heckin' lot of work. It was like 5 days of just hours of looking at catalogues on the days running up to New Year, so enjoy. First on my list is Megacity, edited by Kathleen McCall-Mora, and it's about megacities. It's an anthology written by loads of different writers from all of these different cities. If you don't know, a megacity is a city made up of 10 million or more people, which is nuts for one, but also there used to be two megacities, New York and Tokyo, back in 1950, and now there are like 33 or 37 or something ridiculous like that. They really got me with the tagline, "Witchcraft, terrorism, chemical swamps and corpses for rent are all day-to-day activities in these cities," which grabbed my attention. Second on my list is The War of the Poor by Eric Vuillard. This is a very short and very specific history book about the 15th century Reformation and Thomas Müntzer, who kind of led the charge for, as you guessed, the poor, because the poor were like, yes, I know I'm going to get a good deal in heaven, but my life is shit and there's like plague pits and I'm throwing shit out of the window. I don't know. Life is not great, and I don't think God should punish me in this life. Just promise me something good now and not later. So yeah, I think that should be interesting. I'm not a massive history person. Not that I don't like history, it's just that I got bored with lots of World War stuff in school when I wanted to learn about cool stuff. Probably cool stuff like the 15th century Reformation, to be honest. So yeah, I'm pretty sure I think I'm going to pick this one up. Next is a poetry collection by Annie Freud called Hide and See or Hidden Sea or something like that, which is a island where her family used to go, I think on holiday or for the summer or something like that. Interesting fact, Annie Freud is the great granddaughter of the Freud, Sigmund Freud. In this book she explores, I think it's just a general poetry collection for one, but she also explores her Jewish and German heritage, and also looks at this island, Hide and See, where her family used to holiday way back in the day. So yeah, I think it would be an interesting read. I'm curious about it, haven't read anything of Annie Freud's before, so please let me know in the comments if you have read her and what you think of her. The next book is Aphasia, I don't know if that's how you say it, but Aphasia by Mauro, Javier, Cárdenas. So this novel is about a Colombian man who has lived in America for a long time. He had a wife and kids there but has now divorced his wife, and his sister back home, who used to be very paranoid that the government were going after her. Almost sounds like she has like mental health difficulties, but she actually disappears. So he is called back home, I think after a while of not being there. He is kind of juggling between this kind of more sordid side of himself, so he's on like a sugar daddy website or something like that, and also trying to be a good dad. And I think there's a couple of books coming out this year with this kind of internal dichotomy between this like sexual man who has lots of kind of sordid places to go on the internet, and then this father figure and how we sort of struggle between the two. So I think this could be an interesting book. I've not read anything from a Colombian writer before, so I'm curious about that. And there's one next month that I'm actually looking at, and I think it kind of compares, but is written by a completely different writer. Yeah, I think it could be an interesting one. I'm curious as well if people will take to it, whether people will enjoy it. So, yeah. Next is George Saunders' A Swim in the Pond in the Rain. It says, in which 4 Russians give a master class on writing, reading, and life. So George Saunders is a professor in America, and he specialises in Russian literature, I believe, and he is writing all about the kind of advice. The writer is kind of an all-round guide. It's a writing guide, it's a life guide. It also gives you samples, so short stories from these big Russian writers. So I think not only will it be a nice little writing, reading guide, etc., I think it will be a good introduction for people who are a little bit afraid of Russian literature, because it is a bit scary. They love to deliver massive tomes and all of these books that you really should read, like War and Peace, etc. I think I'm curious about whether it will give me enough of a taste to be able to launch into Russian literature and really enjoy it. Next we have a non-fiction book by Charles Spence called Sensehacking, and it's not usually the kind of book that I would pick up, but I think specifically as someone with some sensory difficulties, I think this will be an interesting read. He talks about how basically we are all overwhelmed sensorily in our lives right now, because there's so many colours and sounds and screens and everything surrounding us all of the time, and we kind of need to learn how to strip that away and do things and sort of arrange our environments so that we kind of can live better lives in general, because we are always experiencing like a sensory overload, and that's going to affect everything about us. He is a psychologist, so he studies this, and I think it could be quite interesting. I'm quite curious about this book. The next book is kind of interesting. It kind of pulls me in and pushes me away, and I think that intrigues me. But it's by Jean-Claude Grumberg, who's a French writer, and it's called The Most Precious of Cargoes. So the story is set just before or during the Second World War, and there's a Jewish father sat on a train with 2 twin babies in his arms, and he knows that they're going to starve. They don't have any money, and he's worried about their survival. I get, like, yeah, you would be, wouldn't you? So he decides that for the best chance for them to survive is to wrap the little girl up in a blanket and throw her into the woods. Yeah. So it's been quoted as having really like fairy tale-like quality, which is why it probably sounds a bit weird, like throwing your baby maybe out of a train window, I'm not sure, into the forest. However, on the other side of that, there is a very poor, equally poor, woodsman and his wife who live in said forest, and one day they discover a baby in the woods. And I think the way it's described is it's like a miracle, so I'm wondering if they can't have children or something like that. I just think it could be a really interesting read. I don't think it's very long as a book. Yeah, it's quite a short book, so I think it'll be a nice kind of quick fairy tale-ish kind of story. Obviously it's got the darkness of its context, but it's also got that kind of hope and this like split up twins and all this. Oh yeah, I like it. The next one has been out in America and maybe elsewhere, but it's just being released in the UK this month. It's Luster by Raven Leilani, and it's a like millennial tale. Again, there's kind of other books a bit like this coming out this year. I think there is a bit of a pattern. So the main character, is a black woman, and she has like an affair, a relationship with a white man in an open marriage. He and his wife are white, and they have an adopted black daughter. And I think from what people have said, the more interesting parts are the relationship between our protagonist and the adopted daughter, because she's kind of grown up isolated from her background. She doesn't know how to do her hair. I know a lot of people are really excited about it. Yeah, we will see. The last book is Jeremy Cooper's Bolt from the Blue, and I almost didn't put this on the list because I'm trying to read less like straight white cis male people. Obviously nothing wrong with it, but I don't want to be completely flooded by them, and I think it is actually quite easy to be completely flooded with only one demographic of authors, and I think it's good to spread out. And the fact that the two protagonists in the story are both women, I was like, because like on one side of things there's like the own voices, which is very important, especially for marginalized people, but then on the other side we've got just writers being good writers and having empathy and doing their research. And yeah, so I'm kind of hoping that this turns out to be a good book because, well, I'll tell you the plot, shall I? So it's an epistolary novel, so it's written in letters, postcards and emails between a mother and daughter over 30 years. The daughter moved to London to be an artist, and the mother stayed in her suburban home in Birmingham. And it's all about their relationship over 30 years, and I think that sounds like a treat. I really like epistolary stuff. I like letters and all that kind of stuff anyway. So I think, yeah, I'm really curious about it. It's by Fitzcarraldo Editions as well, who are a great indie publisher. And yeah, I think there's a lot of Fitzcarraldo Editions on my list this year. So I think they really are an indie publisher to watch. They've got some really interesting stuff, especially if you like literary fiction, that kind of thing. They really, I don't know, they just scream quality to me. So yeah, that's it for January 2021. I'll be back next month with my February anticipated reads, and I'm also going to be wrapping up the books that I've read this month. So yeah, I have no fixed timetable when my video is going to come out at the moment, but we will see how many I can crank out in a month. So stay with me, and thank you for watching.